Though knowable details about the origins of Halloween are somewhat limited, and the gaps in knowledge offer temptations toward revisionism that few historians can resist, there's no doubt that with a little digging, one can secure for oneself a satisfactory cobbling together of the origins, history, practices, and therefore underpinnings of the celebration known to Americans and others throughout the Western world today as Halloween. There's little doubt that Halloween has its supernatural origins in terms of associations with death, an afterlife, tormented spirits, and demons in the early pagan culture of the Celts. The pagan Celts looked upon the dark half of their year, late fall and winter, a time where darkness dominated light and frequency, a time when illness and death were most prevalent, and long winter or poor harvest meant untimely death for many, not with a reverent fear of the Lord and a trust and reliance upon Him to provide for them in the meanest of circumstances, or to deliver them ultimately from even a meager, short existence in the flesh to an heavenly habitation, but as a time of great trepidation. And they believed that the boundaries which separated the temporal world from the supernatural realm became its thinnest or most transparent at Samhain. They believed the spirits of the death could be transported and moved freely amongst the living at this time, this festival called Samhain, this day called Samhain. And some suggest that Celts would actually disguise themselves as these spirits in order to evade detection as a possible target of vengeance or other miscreant mischief by these disembodied souls. As the Crusades and other imperialist surges brought Catholicism into cultural dominance throughout Europe, the Welsh, Celtic, and other pagan cultures had their pagan rituals and festivals Christianized. The idea being that if you merely take a culture's idols from them, you'll have a fight not worth having. But if the crusading force were to keep but redefine such practices in terms of one's own agenda or beliefs, then the new belief system would be much more palatable. So, All Hallows Eve, or Halloween as it became known, was the evening before the artificial construct of All Hallows Day, or All Saints' Day, a time which those recognized as saints by the Catholic Church were celebrated, and regular Christians who were thought to currently be in another artificial construct known as purgatory could be prayed into heaven by a sufficient number of prayers. Commonly, those who had departed friends or family who they feared were in purgatory would offer up soul cakes, I'm not making this stuff up, as a way to get people to pray their departed loved ones into heaven. Many people, commonly beggars and those of mean circumstances, would go door to door, a practice called going a-souling, collecting soul cakes in exchange for their promises to pray for those trapped in purgatory. Though many additions, evolutions, and mutations of this necromancy, witchcraft, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatry occurred throughout Europe over the centuries, including disguising oneself as the opposite gender in violent crimes and mischief, the North American continent had been largely spared, even subsequent to the Puritan pilgrimage to find a land free of cultural impediments to worship. Nearly all Puritans rejected any of the practices that had swept up over time into what was now firmly Halloween. It was not until the years just after the Civil War, when the North American continent was infused by a great number of immigrants, many from Scotland and Ireland, those people seeking to escape the famine that ravaged their homelands. The first written account of the celebration of Halloween in North America was in the late part of the 19th century in Ontario, Canada. Soon after, the spread of Halloween onto American soil included both the spirit of influence of Guy Fawkes Day, largely separated by the British on November 5th every year, and the frustration and violence of a pagan-influenced youth culture of poor Scottish and Irish immigrants, both of Celtic descent and therefore continuing influence, with no fear of God before their eyes. And Halloween, by the first years of the 20th century, had grown to become a night of fear, mayhem, violence, arson, property damage, malicious mischief, and drunken debauchery. So widespread was the mischief that law enforcement could not contain the mischief, and American farmers began referring to the night before Halloween as Gate Night, a night in which, if they didn't chain their gates securely against the onset of mischief the following night, all of their livestock would turn up missing. As a common prank or trick was to unlatch all gates to pens that held livestock the end game of which was teeming herds of livestock roaming aimlessly the next morning. Many homeowners began to bribe the youthful vandals against damaging their property on Halloween night with homemade treats such as popcorn balls and candied apples, setting the treats outside their front doors in the hopes that such offerings would keep the hooligans from tricking or pranking them. Finally, in 1939, both the phrase and the custom of trick-or-treat turned up in print, when Doris Hudson Ross wrote an article in American Home magazine which described her successful attempt to avoid her home being pranked or tricked by hosting a Halloween open house for the kids in her neighborhood. She offered all the children sweets or store-bought candy, and no child vandalized her home. It worked, and the term trick-or-treat was born. Many other civic-born substitutes, carnivals, parades, costume parties continued to subdue the rowdy, undisciplined children's aggressive mischief on Halloween. Paper costume manufacturers were born, candy companies grew, and American culture drew together all of the past imagery of Halloween as expressed in the commercial art sold to further dress up the occasion. Witches, riding brooms, ghosts, bats, skeletons, gravestones, jack-o'-lanterns, all congealed to give Halloween its current identifying symbols. Into the later part of the 20th century, Halloween continued to become the mainstream holiday, holy day, that it is today. Charles Schulz, his Charlie Brown cartoon, The Great Pumpkin, made Halloween as American as apple pie, giving it a distinct Norman Rockwell American mystique that continues to pique the interest of foreign cultures concerning their fascination with all things American. And in the 70s and 80s, the now grown children of the baby boom began expanding the celebration out even further, taking it from a child-centric celebration to one of a nostalgic but decidedly adult, debauched, sexualized, and necromanced nature. And American capitalists, well, they capitalized on this, making Halloween the second largest holiday from a revenue generation standpoint and the professed favorite holiday of many citizens of this nation laden with sin. In America alone, we spend over $6 billion a year on the accoutrement of Halloween. Most probably throughout its history, but certainly in the late 20th century to today, the homosexual culture has embraced Halloween as its most prized holy day. The notions of self-transformation, or going from what you are to what you want to be, is bound up in spiritual wickedness of Halloween, and the FAGs have taken it to a whole new level. Check out Guavaween in the Cuban district of Tampa, or the Halloween parades of San Francisco, Greenwich Village, or Phoenix, for instance. Make no mistake, Halloween is not only pagan idolatry, but it represents every imagination and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God. It is satanic, all of its influences are godless, and there is not a compelling Bible-based argument available for the practice of it anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. If you call yourself a Christian, you have no business coming even a country mile from celebrating Halloween in any form. And any of that, oh come on, it's just fun, it's just dress up, it's candy, there's no harm. Quit being a self-righteous prude, Steve, is an argument belched forth from the bowels of hell. If you are a Christian, your non-delegable duty is to raise your child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Even if you were taught wrong and celebrated Halloween yourself in your youth, ignorantly, there's no cogent position available for the mixing of Christianity and Halloween. It's pagan idolatry. It's fag speak. If you want to let your child dress up, then buy them a costume. If you want your child to have some candy, then give them some. But as soon as you endorse Halloween as something they should embrace, look forward to, engage in, and promulgate, you're passing your child through the fires unto Molech. It's not the furthering of cultural nostalgia or a superstition worthy of inspiring a holiday. It is a pernicious, dark, menacing force, fueled and enriched by the diabolical brain of His Majesty the Devil. God hates Halloween. Amen. For more good Bible preaching, go to GodHatesFags.com. To find out why your nation is doomed, go to GodHatesTheWorld.com. For news, parodies, and documentaries about our doctrine, go to SignMovies.com. For news on the pedophile rape machine called Catholicism, go to priestrapeboys.com. For more on the pure heresy and idolatry called Islam, go to godhatesislam.com. To see the mask peeled off the FAG juggernaut, go to godhatesthemedia.com. And for WBC blogs, go to blogs.sparenot.com.